Jesus Shows You the Way to the Highway is a film that came out in 2019 that's written and directed by Miguel Llanos. So this is a film that comes from a new $50 patron that goes by the name of Blake Bergman. And let me tell you a little something about Blake. Blake is by far the most knowledgeable cult cinema expert that I've ever met. Not only does this guy own more movies than I personally ever witnessed, I believe he owns over 3,000 movies, but he's also just huge into cult cinema and also just outrageous and insane B-grade films. And I mean, he's a huge Arrow and Severin guy, but he's also really into the Criterion Collection as well. So he's kind of best of both worlds, and he's always posting all kinds of outrageous and insane pieces of cult cinema that I've never seen or heard of. And it's just really cool to have somebody like this as a patron and a supporter, because I'm constantly being introduced to these absolute batshit looking films. But with all that being said, when he requested Jesus Shows You the Way to the Highway, I kind of expected something that was going to be pretty damn outrageous. And honestly, yeah, it's out there, but it's actually pretty tame and a quite easy film to watch that I had a lot of fun with. It reminded me of something that I would see on late night Adult Swim. And for that reason, it was really easy for me to kind of get into this film and, kind of understand its shtick. Because this film to me is so many things. One of the biggest vibes that I got from this film was that it really felt like a film that you would make with your friends in high school or something. Except in this manner, it's obviously a lot more professionally produced. And it's also incredibly self-aware with its approach. And it's also incredibly self-referential. This film is referencing and paying tribute to so many different things. It's paying tribute to 80s and 90s nostalgia. It's paying tribute to video games. It's paying tribute to anime. It's paying tribute to comic books. It's paying tribute to shitty movies. The entire plot of this film also revolves around this gigantic political conspiracy type thing. And what I really liked about its entire approach in terms of it being self-referential and paying tribute to all these things is that, yeah, it's paying tribute to all these things because you can tell that the filmmaker either grew up with all this stuff and just wants to pay homage to it. But at the same time, it's also being satirical in the sense that it's kind of making fun of itself and kind of making fun of the way that people do glorify nostalgia. And to me, that was quite clear through a lot of different aspects of this film, but it became mostly obvious through one of the villain characters in this film that's basically a corrupt Batman ripoff that's played by a Jamaican man. And it was also apparent through the incredibly intentional, god-awful dubbing in this film. Throughout this entire film, hardly anybody's lips actually match the audio.
Keep this top secret. Don't tell the others about Agent Tracy.
Yes, Commandant.
And at first I thought it was kind of paying homage and making fun of foreign films that are then dubbed in a different language later. But then I realized that all these characters and actors are actually mouthing what's being presented within the dubbing. So I then realized it's probably making fun of just shitty movies with horrible dubbing, or it just could be a mix of both. I don't know. But anyways, what I'm really just trying to say here is that I really appreciated that this film was able to pay homage to something that is clearly near and dear to the filmmaker's heart, but at the same time being bracketed and being self-aware with what it's doing and being able to kind of, make itself the butt of the joke. I was a bit worried at first that this film was just going to be a big piece of nostalgia porn, kind of like the travesty that we see in Space Jam 2, where it's just constantly being like, hey, do you remember this from the 90s? Hey, do you remember this particular video game from the 90s? Hey, do you remember this show from the 90s? And luckily, this film doesn't really do that. I mean, there's definitely constant references to an era and, certain crucial elements that belong to an era. But at the same time, it's not necessarily jerking itself off over it. But one other thing that I actually liked about this film as well is that there is actually this reoccurring use of stop motion animation in this film. And it's used in a creative way, conceptually speaking, because in this film, the main character and along with other characters in this film are part of the CIA, and they are kind of infiltrating this virtual reality world where other foreign systems of government are using this virtual reality world to hack into information and hack the mainframe systems of other powerful governments. But it basically uses stop motion animation to kind of portray this virtual world. And I thought that was a really interesting way to use stop motion animation. And I don't want to downplay the absurdity and ridiculousness of this film because it is quite ridiculous. This is a pretty dumb fun kind of movie, but it's all very intentional, which is something that made it easier to watch. And I also really like the ending to this film. Even though the kind of twist at the end is cliche, it's kind of supposed to be cliche. But I really like the ending because it sums up the title of the film incredibly well. Because throughout this film, I'm like, why is this film called Jesus Shows You the Way to the Highway? I don't get it. But then by the end of the film, I think it's demonstrated quite clear in a way that was a lot of fun. But there are some negatives that I did have with this film. First of all, I do want to say that this film is quite funny, but I don't really think there's enough comedy. There are sequences that I thought worked great comedically and I was having a great time with. But I thought this film would have benefited from having a lot more comedy throughout the film because it kind of relies, again, on that shtick that I mentioned, where it feels like that's enough to keep you engaged and to keep you entertained. And for me, it's not quite enough. I definitely would have enjoyed this movie a whole lot more if it attempted to be a bit more overtly comedic. And also, I do think it's a bit too long, which is kind of an odd thing to say because this is a pretty damn short movie. This is a movie that's only an hour and 20 minutes, I believe. But I feel like this movie could have been an hour and 5 minutes, an hour and 10 minutes, because it did feel like it was stretching out this concept into a full-length film when it probably would have worked a lot better as a short film. And that was one of my initial thoughts in the first 20 minutes of this film was, how is this film gonna keep this going? And sure enough, it managed it, that's for sure, but it didn't really convince me that this needed to be a full-length film. And also there's a sex scene in this film, a few sex scenes in this film, but the first sex scene I was like, whatever with. But it's the second sex scene in this film that feels like goes on for way too long and is a little bit unnecessary. And it's kind of weird for me to say because I don't mind sex in film at all, actually. But there, it just felt like we don't really need to see that. But I'm still really glad that I watched this film. It actually has an Arrow release, so, depending on how much it costs during the next Arrow sale, who knows? Maybe I'll fork up the money and buy it. So I'm going to give Jesus Shows You the Way to the Highway a solid 6 out of 10. Yeah, I would still recommend this movie. It's definitely not for everybody, but if you're used to watching this kind of intentionally absurd stuff on Adult Swim, I can see you liking this film. So, and I personally had a lot of fun with it. So for that reason, I do think it's recommendable. But that's all I got to say about the film. If you really enjoyed what I had to say about it, please give it a thumbs up and share it amongst your friends. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel to be updated on more film-related content.